The Second World War was a conflict defined by its statistics. Numbers so vast they became meaningless. Millions of men, thousands of tanks. But for men who fought, it was never about the millions. It was about the man next to him. It was about the next shell, the next ration, the next sunrise. Nowhere did the industrial scale of total war and the primal experience of individual survival collide more violently than in the rubble of one city on the Volga. That city was Stalingrad. For the soldiers of the German Sixth Army, it was a name that began in triumph and ended as a death sentence. For the Soviets, it was a symbol of a stand that would cost more than 1,000,000 lives, but in turn break the back of the Wehrmacht. To understand the hell that was going to come, we must begin not in the rubble, but in the mind of the man tasked with taking the city. That man is General Friedrich Paulus, commander of the German Sixth Army. He is a meticulous, brilliant, and obedient staff officer. As his forces prepare to storm the city, his personal observations are not those of a rabid conqueror, but of a professional soldier beginning a difficult task. We start our story on September 12th, 1942. The city is a sea of fire. The bombing by the Luftwaffe has been relentless. The 51st Corps will begin the main assault. Enemy resistance is noted as sporadic, but stiffening. The approaches to the city center are difficult, complicated by the deep gullies and ravines. The troops are confident. They believe this is the final push. I have reservations about the scale of this task. General Paulus. His reservations were well founded. He was sending his men, trained for the fast-moving blitzkrieg on the open steppe, into a new kind of war. A war which they were utterly unprepared. The Germans called it Rattenkrieg, the Rat War. The initial assault, which Paulus and his superiors believed would take days, bogged down in hours. The massive city, pulverized by the Luftwaffe, had not been destroyed as a fortress. It had been improved. Every pile of rubble, every shattered apartment block, every factory, cellar, became a self-contained strong point. On the other side, defending the city, was General Vasily Zhukov of the Soviet 62nd Army. Zhukov was as different from Paulus as one could imagine. He was a bulldog, a brawler. He set up his command post in a bunker so close to the front line that he was constantly under artillery fire. His philosophy was simple and brutal. We will hold the city or die here. There is no land for us behind the Volga. We will hug the enemy. We will keep our front line trench 10 yards from theirs. Let the German planes bomb their own men. Every German soldier must be made to feel that he is living under a gun, until he goes mad. And they did. The life expectancy of a new Soviet soldier ferried across the Volga into the city was at times less than 24 hours, but they kept coming. For the German soldier, the initial confidence of the summer offensive evaporated. Listen to this letter written by a Lancer, an ordinary infantryman named Wilhelm Hoffmann, in late September 1942. Dear parents, the fighting is unbelievable. We have been attacking the same grain elevator for 3 days. The Soviets are dug in. We are not fighting men, we are fighting devils. In the cellar, we hear them scratching and moving above us. In the attic, we hear them below. If a house is cleared, it only means we hold the basement and they hold the kitchen. We have taken 2 streets in a week. My God, what is this war? The Volga is in sight, but we cannot touch it. That grain elevator Hoffmann mentioned? A small group of fewer than 50 Soviet soldiers held off a dozen German assaults, destroying 10 tanks in the process. This was the war in microcosm, not of grand strategy, but of grenade duels in sewers and bayonet fights in the stairwells. The Germans had the technological superiority, but in Stalingrad, it meant almost nothing. A tank was useless in a 10-foot wide alleyway. Air power was useless when you're fighting for the same building. This was also a war of snipers. Soldiers like the legendary Vasily Zaitsev, who claimed over 200 German kills, became Soviet heroes. But for every hero, there were 1,000 terrified men who knew that a simple trip to get water or relieve oneself could mean a single, silent bullet. The battle developed into a contest of storm groups, small, combined arm units of 6 to 8 men per unit. The Soviets perfected it: an infantryman with a submachine gun, a man with explosives, a sniper, and an anti-tank rifleman. They would crawl through the sewers, burst through walls, and clear buildings one room at a time. By early November 1942, the Germans had taken 90% of the city. The Soviet defenders held only a few narrow strips of land, their backs to the frozen Volga River. Victory, for the Germans, seemed agonizingly close. But while Paulus and Zhukov were locked in their life and death struggle for the city, the Soviet High Command, led by General Zhukov, was planning something far bigger. They had been secretly massing over 1 million men and 1,500 tanks on the Sixth Army's flanks. And those flanks? They were not held by elite German troops. They were held by their allies, the Romanian Third and Fourth Armies and the Italian Eighth Army. They were poorly equipped, had little in the way of anti-tank guns, and their morale was low. They had been warning German command for weeks that a Soviet buildup was happening. They were ignored. On November 19, 1942, in the middle of a blinding blizzard, the trap was sprung. The operation was codenamed Uranus. 2 massive Soviet pincers slammed into the Romanian flanks. The front didn't bend, it shattered. For the German soldiers inside Stalingrad, the first sign of a disaster was not a message from command, but a change in the sound of the battle. A diary entry from a German soldier captures the moment. November 20th. For 2 days, we have heard the rumble of artillery from the rear. This is not possible. We are told they are ours, but the sound is wrong. November 23rd. We have heard a rumor. The radio says the Romanians have run. The Russians are a Kulak. That would mean no. It can't be. We are the victors. But it was true. On November 23, 1942, the 2 Soviet pincers met at the town of Kulak on Don, 50 miles west of Stalingrad. In just 4 days, the Soviets had encircled the entire German Sixth Army. Over 270,000 German, Italian, and Romanian soldiers were trapped. The besiegers had become the besieged. The Germans called the pocket of encirclement der Kessel, the cauldron. It is a word that, for veterans of the Eastern Front, meant only one thing: annihilation. General Paulus, now trapped, immediately requested permission from Hitler to attempt to break out. Hitler's reply was unequivocal: "Hold! Do not surrender. The Sixth Army will be supplied from the air." The head of the Luftwaffe, Hermann Göring, personally guaranteed the Führer that he could deliver the 750 tons of supplies the Sixth Army needed every single day. It was a catastrophic lie. The Sixth Army was burning 100,000 gallons of fuel a day just idling their vehicles to keep them from freezing. On its best day, the Luftwaffe airlift delivered an average of 94 tons. Most days, it was far less. And the Soviet Air Force and anti-aircraft guns made every flight a suicide mission. Inside the Kessel, the German soldiers' war was no longer against the Red Army. It was against 3 new enemies: the cold, starvation, and lice. The temperature plunged to -30, then to -40 degrees Celsius. The soldiers had no winter clothing. They were still wearing the summer uniforms they had marched in with. Reading from a last letter. These letters, collected by the army but never delivered. One soldier sums it up. My dearest Maria, I am so cold. We have not had bread in 3 days. My friend Karl froze to death last night. He just sat down in a trench and did not get up. We have eaten the horses. Now, some are looking at the dogs. There are lice everywhere. They are in our clothes, our hair, our food. They carry typhus. The shooting has almost stopped. We just huddle in our holes and wait. I do not know what for. I dream of your soup. Do not worry for me. I am a German soldier. Kiss our son. Morale did not just collapse, it rotted. Discipline vanished. Soldiers who had been masters of Europe 2 months earlier were now fighting each other for a crust of bread dropped from a transport plane. Frostbite claimed thousands. Suicide became common. The wounded were left to die in frozen cellars as medical supplies ran out in the first week. Meanwhile, the Soviets squeezed. They offered terms of surrender which Paulus, bound by Hitler's order, refused. So the Soviets began the final offensive, Operation Ring. They systematically pulverized the Kessel with over 7,000 artillery pieces. On January 31st, 1943, Soviet soldiers found General Paulus and his staff in the basement of a department store. He surrendered, the first German Field Marshal in history to be taken alive. On February 2nd, the last remnants of the Sixth Army laid down their arms. The Battle of Stalingrad was over. The silence after 5 months of constant deafening noise was said to be terrifying. Now let's talk about the numbers, because the human cost of Stalingrad is the real story. For the German Sixth Army, they were encircled. Approximately 270,000 to 300,000 German and Allied troops were taken prisoner, killed in action, wounded, or lost. Over 1,500 tanks, 8,000 artillery pieces, and nearly 750 aircraft were lost. At the surrender, approximately 91,000 men were taken captive. Of those 91,000 men who marched into the Soviet gulags, only 5,000 would ever see Germany again. The rest died of disease, starvation, and exposure in the years to come. The Soviet cost was even more staggering. Total casualties, killed, wounded, and captured, estimated at 1,130,000 soldiers. Civilian casualties before the battle, the city had a population of about 450,000. When it was liberated, fewer than 8,000 civilians were found alive in that rubble. In total, the Battle of Stalingrad cost both sides, military and civilian, nearly 2 million lives. The effect on morale was absolute. For Germany, it was a national catastrophe. Joseph Goebbels declared 3 days of national mourning, and for the first time the German public understood that the war was not only not won, but it could be lost. The myth of the invincible Wehrmacht was shattered forever. For the Soviet Union, it was the greatest victory in their history. It was a symbol of unbelievable sacrifice and unbreakable will. The Great Patriotic War had found its turning point. From Stalingrad, the Red Army would only march west, all the way to Berlin. But for the individual soldier, German or Soviet, who survived it, Stalingrad was not a turning point. It was an ending to their youth, their innocence, their comrades, and their belief in any cause that could justify what they had just seen and done. There, in the fire, in the smoke, in the thunder, was born a new man. He was covered in blood. He was a soldier of the new, terrible Stalingrad world. He was a simple, mortal man, but he is more powerful than concrete and steel.